Greetings and welcome to this next installment of Marstel-Day's Wildlife Conservation Awareness Campaign. I'm Rebecca Rubin, President and CEO of Marstel-Day Environmental Consulting. As we begin today's talk, I think it's important to underscore that no matter what angle you look at it from, we're losing nature every day. Consider that humans have, over time, destroyed more than half the world's forests. In the last 40 years alone, we've also lost 50% of our vertebrate species populations and 76% if you're talking about freshwater ecosystems. In about 20 years, unless we do something about it, icons of nature like elephants and rhinos and tigers and wolves will probably exist only in zoos or other forms of captivity, living history. And most of these challenges will become the unique burden for our children and their children. These kids are not fully prepared to take on these challenges because they have in some measure lost touch with nature. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you today someone who really is doing something about it. Today's speaker is Dr. Mamie Parker, and she's here to talk about reconnecting kids with nature through the Urban Wildlife Refuge program. Dr. Parker is the principal of Mamie Parker and Associates, a public speaking, facilitation, and executive coaching business in the DC area. She's a biologist who spent 29 years at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, including as an assistant director. She made history when she was appointed the service's regional director of 13 northeastern states, the first African American to hold this position in the history of the agency. She currently serves on Marstel-Day's Council of Advisors and on boards of the Chesapeake Conservancy and the National Wildlife Refuge Association. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Mamie Parker.
Well, let me tell you who I am, and maybe I can feel more welcome in your presence. I'm Mamie Parker, and I am an African American that happens to be from Creole and Cajun country, and in my culture, when I call, I feel most welcome when you respond. So let's try it, because we'll be doing it throughout my speech. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. I think I'll stay a while. Thank you for it. I had the privilege of getting some letters from some students that had written after I spoke over a period of almost a year now throughout the Baltimore public schools, connecting kids with nature. I'm going to share some of their words with you. The presentation made me show more and care more for the environment. I believe everyone should take care of the environment just like you to make Baltimore a better place. You help me understand that you can fall in love with something and make a good life doing it. I would love one day to love doing an environmental job as much as you do, Dr. Parker. This came from destiny. I enjoyed seeing the bugs and the maps. And now I'm more interested in the Chesapeake Bay. Draven wrote us that note. Thank you for coming. Also for showing us interesting bugs that I didn't even know exist. I hope you can come back to discuss the Bay again and how I can make it better. And the final one, that one's from David. I enjoyed every minute. I loved how you showed us those magnificent bugs. Some of them creeped me out, but they were interesting. I read that to you because one day as I was driving to Baltimore and had gotten up early, Camille Simpson does a good job of project management. I'm so sorry. Project management for my project that I work on in Baltimore. And we got up at 6:30 one morning to travel to Baltimore to give a presentation. And I was a little tired and somewhat crabby, and she gave me these letters. And it was those letters that helped me. At that point in my life, I felt somewhat stuck, stalled, and scared because I wasn't sure about the environment by which I was about to get into. I didn't know how the students would receive the presentation. I wasn't for sure if I was ready and could bring them the energy that they need to make a difference in their lives. Once reading those, they made me realize that somebody in that group actually got it, and I had a responsibility to rise above being stuck, stalled, and scared. And so this afternoon, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to celebrate Rebecca and Marstel-Day. One of the best things that happened to me was to be able to meet Rebecca and Lee and all of the board members of Marstel-Day and company, and then to have the privilege to look out in the audience and see how the company has grown just since I've been a part of the organization. I'm really happy to celebrate the National Wildlife Refuge System and the leadership, the Chesapeake Bay Field Office at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Patuxent National Wildlife Refuge, some of the places where I've had a chance to go to really connect kids with nature. The National Conservation Training Center out in Shepherdstown has done a wonderful job too in giving us the resources that we need to rise above being stuck, stalled, and scared as we work hard to build conservation partners, look at the Urban Wildlife Refuge program and make it a program that will connect all kids, that's the solution right there, all kids to nature. And then finally, continuous growth and progress, because I don't think it's just enough for us to do things, but we also have to see transformational change as we do things. And it's not always important for us. I heard the words of Jackie Robinson when he was asked a question about whether or not he believed that he could actually work on a team where all members didn't welcome him. And he said, it's not what I believe, but what I do. And these words stuck with me as I watched the Super Bowl this year, and my cousin, Marshawn Lynch, was there, and I thought about my Uncle DC, his great-grandfather. And Uncle DC would always say, when all is said and done, sometimes more is said than done. So as we move toward building diverse partners in urban communities and using these urban wildlife refuge programs to connect kids with nature, we have to make sure we're doing great things, because we have to rise above what's going on in our urban communities. And you know these things, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We got a lot going on in terms of urban development. Of course, the trees in Northern Virginia where I live, they're being cut down all of the time. Habitat fragmentation. We know about sea level rise and what it's doing, the flooding in our communities, the storm surges. We have to rise above that and those challenges and understand that we're not going to always get it right, but we have to figure out a way to at least do it. We have to know that a bend in the road is not the end of the road. We have to rise above water pollution, water quality issues, and water quantity issues even here in the East. We have to rise above the invasive species that are taking over our native species. We have to rise above of all the population growth to figure out a way to save nature. And I'm convinced that our kids will help us do that, like they've helped us do so many other things. So today I'm going to talk about diverse conservation partnerships. I'm going to talk about the Urban Wildlife Refuge System, and as I know it, connecting our kids to nature and continuous growth. But before I get started, most people, many of you have heard my presentation before, so I won't repeat it, but there's one part of it that I always have to highlight, and today especially, because I could have my cousins, particularly Pookie, on the phone, because he follows me all around Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere. He calls me that fish doctor cousin of his. And Pookie is from the urban city. He lives there, and over and over and over again, we have our debates and our discussions about urban wildlife and how important it is and why it's important to protect it. But I also want to talk about my mother. I have to start this story by telling you, it was many, many years ago, my mother, Miss Piggy Parker, had already had 5 boys and 5 girls. And she was about to have her 11th child. And that boy she was going to name Ike, after the President of the United States of America at the time. And I'm so excited that she didn't name me Ike. But she did name me Mamie. And Mamie at the time was the first lady in this country. And being in that position, she continuously pushed me to try to find ways to do great things and rise above the challenges to be a first lady of something. So she taught me to fish in Bayou Bartholomew, Lake Enterprise in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. And here on the banks of those places that I had a lot of life lessons that I think will be valuable when we think about rising above being stuck, stalled, and scared when it comes to reaching out to diverse partners and connecting kids with nature. The other components here were very important in helping me as I worked my way through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and there were a lot of great people throughout the area. And as I speak today, I speak as a former regional director in the Northeast, where we had many urban wildlife refuges that were already in existence, doing great things. And so this urban wildlife refuge program is a little different in that many of these partnerships are in locations where we won't have a land base. And so it would be important to the service employees and others to figure out a way to get there. So why are we here? I've talked to you about those already and I won't go over them again, but these are some of the issues that we're dealing with in our urban communities. We Are Here is what Alicia Keys sings in her latest song, We Are Here. That song in my mind has 2 meanings. When it comes to diverse partnerships, I think sometimes we think that we're the only ones that are there. The conservationists, the environmentalists, those that are in the movement think that we're the only ones that are there. But in Alicia Keys' song, she let us know that we, meaning all of us, are there. We just have to figure out a way to reach out and make other individuals feel important, competent, valued. We are here. And then the next thing, we need to let the diverse partnerships understand people in these partnerships, whether or not they are environmentalists, whether or not they're business people, whether or not they are different races, sexes, ages. We really need you. And the songwriter says, I need you, you need me, I need you to survive. And that's the key when we talk about urban wildlife habitat. We have to be open to successes and accept failures. We have a tendency in life, I think, to think everything has to go well all of the time. But it's okay if it doesn't work out all of the time. We're not going to always be successful. We're going to stumble and we're going to fall when we reach out to kids. Some of them will receive us, others won't. When we reach out to partners that are not accustomed to having us, they will do the same thing. But I'm reminded of the song again, we fall down, but we get up. We fall down, but we get up. For winners, there are losers that fell down, but got back up again and again and again. This is something that John Maxwell talks about when he says, listen with our hearts. And sometimes when I've gone out and talked to students, and I've given them all of the science, and I've given them all of the animals, and talked to them about what they mean, where they live, where they eat, where they have their babies, their nurseries. And I have to stop and think, this sounds good, but when their eyes really, really light up, when they know that I heard them, when the kids really know that I listen from the heart. And I tell this story about Dr. Covey because he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And he says that listen, the same letters in listening are the same letters in silent. Sometimes we have to remember that. My husband said it best when he says, sometimes when I blow up, you should just shut up. Just shut up. Listen with our hearts. And then the last thing, I think in terms of diverse partnerships and how we build them, is a commitment, a long-term commitment. We can't just come in, stay a while, and then leave. You all know this already, that it takes building a long-term commitment with communities, with churches, with other organizations that are there to make sure that we stay where we are in the process. I cannot have a speech without talking about these. I say 4 cancers of life because at the end of the day, contending, if you start any of these, you'll end up contending. But the emotional cancers that sometimes as individuals, and in order for us to build any form of a partnership, we have to start with ourselves, individual selves. And one of the biggest challenges that I have, I'll just speak for Mamie Parker, is sometimes complaining. And what I've learned about complaining, I share this with most groups, is like the research have proven that when we complain, 85% of the people that we're complaining to, guess what? They don't care. The other 15%, they're just so happy. Whatever we're complaining about is not them that's in that position. So let's be careful about that. Comparing. When we go to urban communities, when we look at urban wildlife, what I realize out there in the world is that we can't compare the acreages that we have in the larger blocks of land. We have to look. It might be a small block, but it might play a very significant part in what's important. It's a piece of the puzzle too, and we can't exclude that piece of the puzzle. And the best way I describe this to the children when I go out and talk to them in urban communities, I tell them about growing up. And my mother would line up all of the children every morning to remind us that we were Parker Rollins, and when we go to school, we needed to do the right thing and represent the family well. And she would say, you are a piece of work. You are a piece of work. Now you can talk to yourself now and say that in 2 different ways, right? You're a piece of work, or you're a piece of work. Exactly how she did it. When she talked to the twins, she was saying, you're a piece of work. But when she talked to the others, many of the others, she was telling them that you're a part of the family. And when we think about urban wildlife, I think we forget that sometimes because we're so excited when we see something that's extinct, something that's different and unique. But these urban wildlife components are important too. So comparing can get us in a lot of trouble. When we compare, we're either putting something up or putting someone down. So the essential lessons here on that. Learning from others. Stuck, stalled, and scared. A lot of times we don't move forward because somebody else tried it and it didn't work. But in many cases, other folks tried it and it did work. And I love shoes. And one of my favorite quotes is that, if the shoe fits, buy it in every color. And that's what I think we should do when we think about learning about partnerships that have already happened in other communities, learning about urban wildlife, refuges, the way we've done them in Philadelphia at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge there, where Lamar Gore is the manager, and they are doing great things. They've always done great things at that refuge. We think about Bombay Hook, San Francisco, all these wonderful places. And if I think about what's made those individual refuges important and also significant and really sustainable, it's that they've looked at all of these individual items here and connected to nature, to children, and they've achieved results. Begin with the end in mind. What I want us to make sure we understand in all of this is that we have existing partnerships already available. They're out there at a regional level. The service is doing a wonderful job in working with landscape conservation. State, they are doing excellent work connecting children with nature. In fact, I have to go down to my home state of Arkansas in a month or so. We're going to do programs with young girls, connecting girls to STEAM careers, not just STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but we're adding the A to it for STEAM. And we're going to do something called high esteem, where we're not just going to introduce them to the outdoors, but also careers in the outdoors, and we're going to help them with personal development as well, which I think is important, and self-confidence. At the local level, they're doing great things there too, shaping conservation values. And they're doing it by using many different models already, setting different priorities, creating public trust, understanding the value of urban areas. So, Urban Wildlife Refuges, the Fish and Wildlife Service, under the leadership, and I put critical leadership there, Cynthia Martinez as well as Jim Kurt, came up with this brilliant idea, along with others, that there's an opportunity for us to do great things in urban communities with our refuge program. We have great interpreters already, we have some great models, but there's still some work that needs to be done to get us there. Understanding urban audiences, identifying the barriers, listening, again, is important. Trust and respect, and I put in parentheses over there, the Missouri farmers is an example where I learned that when I worked in Missouri and had to work with the farmers in the Boot Hill of Missouri, and it wasn't always easy for them, and most of the time it wasn't easy for me to get them to understand, but it was so important for us to focus on trust and respect. And then the shared strategy. That's what the Urban Wildlife Refuge program is all about, these components. And so they're working with the University of North Carolina, and they're working with USGS, as well as other organizations to do that. They identified partnerships that were already in existence, but they wanted to make them feel and also show their support. So they have urban wildlife partnerships that they're highlighting in New Haven, Connecticut, the LA River, in Houston, the Chicago Forest Preserve areas, in Seattle, and in Baltimore, as well as Providence and Albuquerque. They've also done something that I think that was really important too, is they got academia involved, but they also had a wonderful urban academy, Urban Wildlife Academy, where we all came together to talk about the challenges that we had to try and overcome some of these challenges. And of course, the center of all of that, in my considered opinion, our challenges, barriers, and strategies, how they are overcome, simply means that we have to add Washington to the puzzle. Beyond being stuck, stalled, and scared, I mentioned the Baltimore Project because I'm really excited about the work that we've had a chance to do in the Baltimore wilderness area. And to the right on the screen, there's a lot of words there, but right, it's all about, they have identified 4 priorities, and you'll see them there: biodiversity, environmental education, as well as environmental equity, environmental justice. And that's been amazing how we can mobilize and get additional partners as we work there. But Masonville Cove, special place in my heart, in the Baltimore Harbor. The Maryland Port Authority, the mitigation, they've done some work and some dredging, and so they wanted to mitigate. This is one area that's been designated as an urban partnership by the Fish and Wildlife Service, with a lot of help from many partners, including our Chesapeake Bay Field Office, Patuxent, the Living Classrooms, as well as the National Aquarium. And it's here that I've had a chance to go to that Masonville Cove, and also go to Ben Franklin High School, which is a partner to this whole partnership, and talk to those students from those letters that I just read to you. And it's here that I listen and I hear them, but I also see that transformation as they think about what it means to embrace the Chesapeake and how important it is. And so in spite of our diverse beliefs, ideas, movements, and agendas, sometimes we can come together as they have done in the Baltimore wilderness area. To do this, it requires us to do a lot of stretching ourselves. And here's something that I try to do every day, and it's not always easy, but do things that scare me. Every day I try to do at least one thing. one thing today was coming here to speak before you about urban wildlife refuges. But again, when you see this, you see ways in which we can do this. And now, if you look at the bottom, I call these the 3 M's. And when we talk about introducing kids to nature and ways in which we can win them over, connecting them to nature, I think we need the 3 M's. We need to create the memories. We need to provide the mentors, and we need to find the funding that they need to make it happen. Creating the memories, bringing bugs to them, but taking them to see the bugs and other animals, wildlife that's important to them. Providing mentors is so important. I think about my own life and my own journey as the only woman in many cases, and most of the time being the only African American. I can recall being in Minnesota, walking down the street, and this little girl telling her mom, "Oh, mommy, look at the chocolate one." And that was so funny to me because she had not seen a person of color before. And here was an opportunity for me to mentor her about me being different but the same, that my skin felt the same, my heartbeat was the same, but also to talk to her about conservation issues as well. Mentoring, internships, and how important they are, but have people there to survive and be there with them, and then find the money that they need to do that. So how important that is. I'm going to move on really fast. How to win with people. John Maxwell has a great book on that. The key word there is win with people. Okay? And then fear. We got to talk about fear. Any word that is feared is powerful. So when we talk to kids, when we tell them how important it is, we got to let them know that they're powerful and they can make a difference. Celebrating our achievements. And here are some organizations, some opportunities that we've had to really, really celebrate some success stories, rising above. The Chicago Wilderness, I had the privilege of working on that 20 years ago, and now it's used certainly as one of the role models for that. Richard Louv has written a book about connecting kids with nature, and he talks about nature deficit disorder. I have that myself. The Schoolyard Backyard program is a program that the service, I'm sure, will be using in some parts of the country, where you're helping teachers and students understand how to create habitat on their grounds. Stewardship is important there, social development, technical assistance, working with the education department on new schools construction and renovation, building diverse partnerships, and connecting kids with nature. In the end, as I close, our communities will have more advocates, we'll have a healthier population, we're certain that we'll have a healthier urban environment where our kids are driven to explore, discover, and play while refining their own motor skills. Our students will have the chance to lead a happier and a more fulfilled life.